Hi, my name is Jim Janecek. I'm the editor of the magazine Microcar News from the Vintage Microcar Club. The Vintage Microcar Club is primarily a U.S.-based club of enthusiasts that are interested in vintage microcars, vehicles that are over 25 years old, and also are microcars. And we classify a microcar very loosely as anything under 1,000 cc's. Microcars emerged primarily post-World War II. The European economy after World War II was in shambles. Most average people at the time in Europe could not afford a real car. And by real car, I mean a Volkswagen Beetle. So eventually, enterprising people decided they could enclose a scooter and keep you out of the rain, keep you out of the weather. Two of you could travel together. And things built on that, and eventually a whole wide variety of little microcars emerged. Many manufacturers that were building airplanes and war machinery during World War II suddenly ground to a halt and had nothing to do. At their heart, though, they were factories. They needed to have some other products to build. And very slowly they started making more things, different things. A number of them made sewing machines, and pretty much all of them made vehicles of some kind or another. Germany produced two of the most iconic microcars, the BMW Isetta and the Messerschmitt KR200. The BMW Isetta was one of the most successful selling microcars. At least for BMW, they sold 168,000 of them, but BMW didn't design it. In the mid-50s, sports cars and high-end cars were not selling well, and BMW needed to find something to sell, and they knew there was a market for small cars at the time, but they had nothing on the drawing board. And it turned out that ISO Rivolta in Italy had a design for a small vehicle, and they were licensing it. So BMW bought a license to make and sell that vehicle. The big feature of the car was that it had no apparent door on it. It was egg-shaped, and the whole front of the vehicle was a door, like a refrigerator. The steering wheel was attached to the door, and there was a universal joint at the bottom so that it pivoted out with the door. And this enabled you to get in the vehicle much easier. BMW actually started making them in 1954, and I don't think they came out until 1955. They were manufactured, I believe, until about 1960, and that was basically the end of the microcar era. And one of the reasons a large percentage of these survive is that at the time, if something conked out in your car at 16,000 miles, you'd find the dealer didn't work on the cars anymore, or the dealer wanted too much money to mess with it, and so you go, well, I'm just going to get to that later. And you'd push it in the back of your garage, and you go, I'll fix it later. And because they were so small, and they could fit back there and stay without taking up a lot of room, they just sat for years and years and years and years and years. Then slowly people would pull them out, and there was a resurgence of interest in them in the late 1970s and early 80s thanks to a club that was formed by a woman in California. And so a lot of them got pulled out of the woodwork, and they became collectibles. At a microcar meet in South Florida, a number of us had gone out with our vehicles, and as we're pulling in the parking lot, this giant Ford F-650 truck pulls in. It's the same color as the yellow Isetta, and so we very quickly got the yellow Isetta to drive up next to it just for scale so you could see the difference. The Messerschmitt, like the Isetta, was also from Germany, 200cc, two-stroke engine in the back. Drives a single rear wheel. But it is kind of odd because it's the only car that really doesn't have a door at all. It has a canopy and a bubble top. So it looks like a fighter plane. For some people, this can be a little disconcerting when they're in it, but it's a relatively comfortable car to drive. The driver sits in the front and the passenger sits in the back, basically with their legs straddling the front seat. It goes very fast. Even though it has a 200cc motor, the car only weighs 450 pounds. So you can easily get up to 55, 60 miles an hour in this. Initially, the car was only available with that clear acrylic plexiglass dome, and later a cabrio convertible top was available instead of the dome, and then kits were available and you could adapt them. The King Midget began its life basically as a pile of parts you could buy. The makers of this were Claude Dry and Dale Orcutt, and they started out selling surplus aircraft parts and surplus World War II parts. And at some point they realized they could build a car out of this stuff. And so they put together enough parts and then actually put together a kit, and you could buy what was called the King Midget. They advertised in the back of magazines starting as low as $50, and you'd buy them out of Athens, Ohio. And they'd come to you in a crate, and you'd assemble them yourself, and boom, you're on your way with your own car. Later, they came out with a little more advanced version called the King Midget 2. Second one you couldn't put together by yourself. It was sold as it was. The Peel was manufactured by an engineering firm on the Isle of Man. The Peel P50 has the distinction of being recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's smallest production car. The car did not have a reverse gear on it, but that wasn't really a problem because they put a handle on the back. You could lift it and then just pivot the car around. At Microcar Meet, you normally just see a lot of the similar marks. You see a lot of Izettas, a lot of Messerschmitts, a few other different cars, but that's about it. You might see maybe 30 cars, maybe at an average meet. But when you go into the Bruce Weiner Microcar Museum, you see over 200 vehicles, and most of them are all different. And when they're not different, you're looking at variations within a particular mark. The Bruce Weiner Microcar Museum is located in Madison, Georgia, which is about 1 hour east of Atlanta, Georgia. And it's just overwhelming to walk in and see, all in one fell swoop, all this history in front of your eyes that most Americans are not even aware of.